is the president and co-owner of Hydrogen Advertising. Mary is an executive creative director and also mentioned her background in the ownership of the agency. It's an award-winning independent agency based in Seattle, Washington. With decades of industry experience, Knight spent years as an executive creative director at major global agency networks, including FCB Global and DDB Worldwide, before stepping into leadership at independent shops. Honored with the American Advertising Federation Silver Medal Award for Outstanding Contribution to Advertising, she has served on juries for prestigious industry awards like the One Show, Effie, and Communication Arts. Known for advocating against the sea of sameness, the trap of safe, forgettable brand marketing, and has led campaigns for major global and regional brands, including Boeing, DiGiorno, Tabasco, American Airlines, Motorola, and Group Health Cooperative. Mary, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I know I gave a little bit of a bio there, but we actually did a retrospective on DDB, starting with David Angelo from David and Goliath. I don't know if you guys ever overlapped or not, but maybe you could give me a little bit about a little bit more of a context with your background, and would love to hear a little bit about DDB because we're sunsetting the letters this year, sadly. But where'd you grow up? What'd you study, and how'd you get into advertising?
I grew up in Texas, and that's actually where I worked at. I worked at DDB Dallas.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Went to school at University of Texas at Austin, and went through the ad program there, and landed at what is now TRG, I believe, and ultimately at DDB, which was Tracy Locke. DDB actually had. That was my first time to have 3 different company business cards. So I had a DDB, a Tracy Locke, and we worked on a telecommunications company that is long gone, but it was called GTE. And so I had Focus. That was the company for GTE. So that was formative years in Dallas. And I love to call that like the beginning of my big agency brat tour. And I guess they're all the letters are going away. Jumped up to the Pacific Northwest and joined Borders, Parent and Norinder, which folded into, I keep finding my way back to networks, at least in my history. That ultimately turned into FCB, and
got it.
Did a little jump to Chicago for 5 years. And that's where I worked on DiGiorno and Quest, another telecommunications company that now has a different name, and a lot of the craft brands as well. And then
fun.
Back to what I call home, which is Seattle. After all these years, this is where both my kids were born, and brought everybody home, and joined Hydrogen with the intent to take over the agency one day, and convinced my business partner, Michael McGrath, to join me a year later. And it's our 3rd time to work together. And we were creative team all through that, and writer, and he's the art director. And 3.5 years ago, we bought out the last original founder, and became owners of Hydrogen. And I went from creative director to president. So I've been having this wonderful crash course in learning a lot about media, as you and I were chatting about, and the account team, and really having a bigger purview of the whole agency. And it's been pretty exciting times. We've more than doubled in size since we took over.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks. And that's hard work, being in the right place at the right time, and great clients that have been growing with us. So all good.
So cool. So tell me a little bit about, so it sounded like when you joined Hydrogen, you kind of had a plan to eventually want to own the agency yourself. I think, we're coming up on this moment right now. I think it's like, I don't even know how many trillions of dollars moving from the baby boomers to Gen X and other generations of opportunities to, pass the torch, and a lot of legacy planning inside of the the advertising industry, especially in the indie scene, is no exception to the rule. So, what got you thinking about wanting to become an owner other than just like a partner at one of the bigger networks inside of indie land? And like, were you strategic in kind of finding an agency that could give you a pathway to ownership? Or tell me a little bit about that journey, because I think a lot of executives, that sounds like a pretty interesting way to go about becoming an agency owner versus having to do the startup thing.
Right. Yeah. And I know we were super fortunate to, an agency with a fantastic name. It's like, well, we're not changing that. Um,
Yeah, right.
yeah. I mean, the whole idea of like the simplest element in the universe and, standing for simplifying the complex, which the agency turns 25 next month. And
Wow.
that positioning is even more relevant, and all of the AI stuff we're all tired of talking about, but like, you know, that makes it even more, simplifying the complex is more important than ever. So we take the complex stuff that's taking away from the human brain energy, and putting that to work in the right ways, and delivering it to clients in a way where, like this extremely complex media landscape, we can roll it up, really see what's going on out there, use AI in the right places, and deliver insights and thinking and original creative thought, which is something as of yet, call me in 10 years. AI can't do that, Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's
Yeah.
AI is really good at synthesizing large chunks of information, but it's hard at predicting. Well, it's not very good at having original thoughts, right? Like coming up with
Yeah.
something. It's good at looking at the total sum of past information, synthesizing that, and giving you kind of jumping off points. But it's all based on what's already happened. It's not coming up with original creative ideas. But great
Yeah.
for jumping off points, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think even original media strategic ideas and incapable of original thought is a phrase I use a lot. I love hearing you say that too. Okay, so back to how we got to hydrogen. I knew it was time to head back to Seattle, and I had worked with both of the co-founders, Rick Peterson and Tom Shear, in a previous life at SCB Seattle, and they had formed Hydrogen with another business partner, and they were the two who had continued the business forward. And they were looking for like who's their next generation. Definitely, having come off of a long career in big agencies, like being knowing that oh, okay, I don't have to always feel for that knife in my back, and which sometimes happen at some of the larger agencies, especially if people feel like there are only so many seats at the table and they have to protect theirs. Um, that had a really good, easy relationship with Rick and Tom. They were looking for what was next. They had just brought in a big piece of business. Joined them, with the intent to start to accrue ownership in the company. So why did I decide to do it? I think it was like, I would love to be able to have an agency where the layers of decision making are a lot more streamlined, because I could see a lot of, wasted time, wasted energy, wasted thought that was happening. And I knew there was a better way. And I'd had enough of the indie experience at Borders to know that, there was a better way. So it was exciting to join them, liked and trusted them. Lured Mike to join, and he was someone that I liked and trusted as well. And that's what you like. The longer I do this, the more that's really what it's about.
Yeah, people who have each other's back, like you said, and
Mhm.
it's more when you get kind of to your maybe the back end of your career, the second stage of your career. It's more about the people you work with, and knowing that you're going to be spending a lot of time with them, making sure that those folks push you, challenge you, make you think bigger and in brighter ways, but just are pleasant to be around with and work with every day.
Yeah, yeah. Call it like you see it, but know that you still are supporting each other as you do it. Because yeah, we can only we have to hold each other up to a certain standard and push each other, and also bring in fresh thinking. So it's not just about all people we've worked with, but
Yeah.
Which,
All right. Let's talk about your concept around the sea of sameness, because I think it does apply. I think we kind of preluded it a little bit in our conversation around AI, but I think it is actually very relevant. You often warn brands against falling into the sea of sameness. I recently interviewed somebody who told me, third party from a search consultant, that a search consultant basically RFP'd 3 agencies on behalf of a client. All 3 agencies used AI to respond to the brief and turned in the same response to the brief. And none of the agencies were awarded the business, and the search consultant was fired from the brand from not vetting this process. So when we are all, in these LLMs, and knowing that it's got really great capabilities to take what we used to consider busy work off the table and synthesize data and do all of these great things, but when it's all kind of like reaching for the same ingredients, like, I think we very much run a risk from running into that level of that sea of sameness. And sometimes it can be more subtle and won't show up to like where it's as blatant as causing the issue, the scenario that I just ran you through. But how do you think about leveraging these new tools in a way to be faster and more nimble, but then not fall into the sea of sameness?
well, I mean, I think, some people had, and I've been doing this long enough that I can remember multiple tools coming along and saying like, oh, great, we'll never have to do X again, or everyone can try this now, or, it's now something that anyone can do. And I think we've found out over time with previous tools, and I understand AI, is a whole different league, but each step has been a whole different league.
Yeah.
Um, it's not the strategy, it's not the original thought. And so anytime, if we're trying to, replace, you, I heard somebody, in fact, just recently, I heard someone describe AI as almost an intern, with all due respect to interns, but it's like you would never just take something an intern did and not even look at it and just push it forward. So why would you do that with a machine that may like make some stuff up or is pulling from the same, like that story is kind of unbelievable. It's like, really, dude? I mean, we've all been in like, as a career creative, we've all been in that pitch where at least 2 agencies had almost the same creative idea. But imagine every step of the process, and that happens because we're all, working from the same input, and sometimes we all think we're being original, but sometimes we're not.
Yeah,
Um,
there aren't original ideas, usually just the people who can get them done the fastest, right?
That's right, that's right. Or put the most, unique new spin on, like,
Yeah.
6 original idea or 6 ideas, and everything's a variation of one. But, anytime we try to lean too heavily on a tool and try to get it to think for us, I think, we run in danger of getting to that unoriginal thought. It's not
Yeah. Your intern analogy, I think, was very poignant, because if you can think about like the early days of social, like that was social media strategy. Remember when I was like, oh yeah, we have an intern, they're doing social.
Yep.
And now they're managing what could have been considered or will be considered maybe one of the most important channels of communication. And it was kind of like, whenever new technology showed up, it was like throw an intern at it. So I think that's really interesting. Let's talk about, the sea of sameness in the context of, even outside of AI. I interviewed the CMO of Farmers Insurance one time, and he told me his goal was to keep the decision-making committee to the least amount of potential people, including senior executives, because when everybody gets to weigh in, because everybody has an opinion about advertising and marketing, because we're all consumers of those things, the more decision makers, the more chance for the creative to kind of go to the middle, to the safest potential execution. And, like back to the analogy about everybody has an opinion, I would never come to the chief, the CIO of an organization and say, hey, we should probably be on Amazon Cloud instead of Microsoft. Like, what right do I have to make that assertion? But at the end of the day, advertising seems to be a little bit different because I think as consumers, we're exposed to so much of it. Sure. So I'd be curious if you could give, what are the earliest warning signs that a brand's marketing has become safe, derivative, or invisible?
When it's following the trends that we're seeing everywhere else. There's a pretty hilarious quote that I probably will butcher, but it's fairly fitting. Was it search all your towns and your cities, you'll find no statues, two committees. Like, the more people that get involved, the more watered down it gets because one people may be, like, and obviously it has to be true to the brand, and people have to be able to walk down the hall of a brand and say, like, I believe in this advertising, so it has to, truthfully come out of the company, where the company, their brand promise and but the more people you get weighing in on the little pieces, the more likely you are to have something that will potentially be noticed by no one because there's nothing about it to draw your attention anymore.
Having worked at massive global shops like FCB and DDB before leading an independent agency like Hydrogen, what can nimble independent agencies do that holding company giants struggle to match these days?
I think I talked earlier about one of the draws to me to join Hydrogen was the decision-making hierarchy. And, obviously we don't want the committee to weigh in on everything because we won't get a statue then. But to remove some of those layers, and I think that also tampons, even within an agency, that can either tampen or skewer, smart creative ideas as it's working its way up the ladder. Because I think the more layers there are, the more people are problem solving for what they think the next person in the layer might have an issue with. And that can really water things down quickly.
Stepping into agency ownership and the president role requires shifting from a pure creative decisioning to running a business. What was the steepest learning curve in making that transition from creative to business owner?
Knowing just enough about media to be dangerous. And I'm going to say, and I know Greg Tamura, our media director, does this every time I say this, but I said, media people, like good strategic media people, are exactly the same as creative people. And there's a lot of the same type of thought process. Obviously, there's a lot more, for lack of a better word, left brain at work in media and more tools. And no one wants creativity or gray space when it comes to media numbers and things like that. So definitely, earning my credibility, with both the account team and the media team, I think was, and I still remain humble there, and actually am a lot deeper into client relationships, which I actually really enjoy than I have been. But, sometimes, especially at the bigs, it was we've got this, stay in your room and make some ads. So really, I always crave the big picture, even if we're doing just one piece with a client. So being able to see the landscape, talk with the client about what their business issues really are and how we can get there together, and rising above an assignment to really help them solve problems. It was something that I had a little bit of, but really being able to focus on that's something as well.
That's cool. Yeah, I interviewed a chief creative officer at a large automotive agency, or an agency that's owned by an automotive conglomerate. You could probably figure that one out pretty quick. But he wrote a book on the idea that, creatives get rewarded as they kind of go through their career, with less opportunity to actually impact creative and more about creative stewardship and, you know, generating a creative environment or stewarding creative talent as a manager. It's like the better you do, the more you get kind of removed from the work. And I think it's interesting from the context of agency ownership. I imagine you've probably, to some degree, even at an indie, had to like maybe step back and, let the ad people do their thing, like you mentioned, a little bit less than you may have in the past in your career. But I think that's an interesting component, whether it's from the perspective of like rising up the ranks in a traditional larger agency and just getting more and more managerial as you move up the path, or starting to branch out in either the entrepreneurship side. So I think that's really interesting. All right. As someone who has served on juries for both the one show, Effie's Communication Arts, what specific quality separates a good campaign for an award-winning one?
Boy, it depends. I mean, first of all, there's that that moment of relief when you're looking at work and you do get to something. You're like, you can almost just immediately feel it. Like it's well put together, it's well thought out. In many cases, it's very well executed, but it's been thoughtful. It's not, and you can feel it as a judge, and you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of submissions. So to be like, oh, and then especially like when you get to radio or something, and then, to land on something that has a cohesive thought. And if it's an integrated campaign, which, is one of my loves, and like, I do really enjoy Effie because, I think, we're making art for commerce. So it should move and drive something. It shouldn't just,
Should
hang
be
on a
tailored
wall.
to results. Yeah. Shouldn't just,
Yeah.
for the
Mhm.
sake of winning a statue and nothing else.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, like we're creating art for, to assist our clients in solving a business problem, and we're all in the world of commerce. But a cohesive thought that extends as a thread through all of those pieces as well. I mean, the more different platforms, the more, like we were talking about, influence or something like that takes a more prominent role, there's still a kernel, there's still a hook that holds the best ideas together. And as a career creative until recently, and I still have, of course, part of my heart there. Um, does it make me wish I'd done it? And it is a gut thing, and that's probably a over time experience thing, where you move from pure jealousy to like admiration for things like they're really like of our what 6 or 8 original creative ideas, like that's something that and that's something I look for in staff too. And when we bring in new people, you know, is it something that we don't want to recreate what we'd already do? We want someone who's going to come in and do something in a new and different way and show us like potential. Otherwise, we could just do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, on the judging process, you're starting out with maybe 500 submissions, and then you could almost like it's a palatable difference between, the projects that or the work that gets submitted that meets the bar, in which you kind of have that like sigh of relief, like you found something. I guess that's what they call the shortlisting process, I would imagine,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. How hard is it once you get into the short list in coming up with the winner? Is that more high stakes and more, subtle? This is kind of fun because I haven't gotten as much behind the scenes judging play by play, in interviews before.
It depends on whether you're making the decision yourself or
Oh
whether
yeah.
you're trying to get to like a best in show with a group.
Mm.
So I find that it's usually pretty easy to get to the top 2 or 3. The ones that you just can't get out of your head, especially if it's a multi-day judging, to come back the next day and go like, I can't get that one out of my head. And it just really moved me, or something about it really stood out. I will say I've sat in, a room for 5+ hours talking about what deserves best in show, and everybody's just trying to like case building, and you know we we all have, and I don't believe any of them were directly connected to the work. I think just ask, 4 creative directors get 5 opinions, and so you like to get us all to agree that there's like the one. It happens every once in a while, but it doesn't happen every time. So it becomes a conversation, bringing up like why you feel that it's unique and deserves it over the other one that or two that are in contention. And then sometimes, you say like, okay, it's really great work. It is award-winning work. I still like that one, but that it's the majority rules at that point.
That makes sense. So yeah, it is a true jury in the
Mhm.
context that it doesn't necessarily have to be unanimous, but it can go. Sometimes there can be dissenting opinions or opposite opinions, and it goes into quite a bit of deliberation.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I've ever been in one of those multi-hour conversations where someone did not respect something that was on the table, though. That would be a whole
Mm,
different thing. But I'm sure that could happen. Mm.
interesting. All right. When economic pressures cause brand clients to play it safe, how do you pitch bold, unconventional, creative concepts so clients feel confident in saying yes?
I think there's no more dangerous time to be the wallpaper we talked about that can happen when multiple people weigh in and multiple layers water an idea down. Like, how can you afford to be the invisible, your budget is shrinking, your competitors, that base is growing. How can you afford to be invisible or for someone to be able to look at that work and not remember whose logo or like who it's from?
Mm,
That is a lot scarier than an idea that's going to stand out.
so you think that the CMO that's number 14 in a 15-person category, they almost are required to be a disruptor and to come up with bold work, or at the end of the day, you're just managing decline?
Yeah, I mean, and not even, I mean, I would say even further up than that. And, even as a category leader, I know some category leaders have such a heavy spend that they may say, like, okay, we're not going to do anything to like ruffle any feathers anywhere. But I think most of the really big category spenders um, do disrupt and try different things. They have the freedom to, run multiple campaigns at the same time and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think, um, we, and number one does have the opportunity to say like if we're out there everyone knows it's us, but most brands are not in that position. I would say even number 2 and 3.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, I used to hear like also the idea that, like Nike, for instance, didn't consider itself in the sporting goods business. They didn't look at Adidas as their competitor. They looked at like Netflix as their competitor,
Yeah.
or Apple, like other brands that were pulling away mind share from time spent with their brand with other world class brands that were completely in other categories. But, like at the end of the day, we're all fighting for like share of wallet and share of attention, right? And share of engagement. So I always love that idea of like, transcending your category and just thinking about the broader aspects of economics and mind share and time spent. But all right. You've led highly praised campaigns in healthcare and complex consumer services. How do you find human emotion and simplicity in heavily regulated, or what some would consider technically dry industries?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I've throughout my career been a fan of emotion that's relevant to a brand, that's believable for a brand. You can't like slap comedy on, certain very serious, like you wouldn't take a very serious healthcare brand dealing with life or death and slap comedy on it, I don't think. But, we have multiple emotions, but, to me, emotion is that foot in the door that makes you think of a brand as less of a company trying to sell me something and more of, oh, this is a brand or, like a company or even a person that, I like what they're saying. I feel a connection. And if we can build that connection on an emotional level, then we can help them stand out and and claim their stake in what is a very busy category. But I think so many times, like you see this with like what I call like the gratuitous use of celebrity. Like if you just bolt a celebrity onto a brand without having it really come out of like the business problem and why you're bringing that celebrity in, it just goes left field. I think the same is true for emotional hooks. Um, you're going to separate from all of the other brands out there if you can build that relevant human connection between the brand and your audience.
Yeah, the celebrity play, even in the Super Bowl campaign, sometimes like the celebrities feel just like a bolt on. And then,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, you don't remember the work, but feel like when you reach for a celebrity spokesperson, you really have to do some homework and thinking about like, do they represent the avatar of your customer? And, will your customer relate to them? Do they care about them? Versus
Yep.
just kind of, the CMO like so and so or their kids do or whatever.
Yep.
Hydrogen was recognized as a top workplace in Seattle. In a high stress agency environment, how do you maintain a supportive culture without sacrificing creative standards or pitch deadlines?
I'm going to go back to 2020 for that one. When one Friday in mid-March, Governor Jay Inslee, who was governor at the time, I think we were one of the first states in the country to order he issued a stay-at-home order. So we had to go virtual pretty much overnight. And as part of that process, and part of that was like we were all trying to figure out, like, how's everybody doing? What's going on? Nobody knows what's going on at that point. We started doing this daily 10 a.m. virtual, like screen check in with everyone. And it was just, we called it the hello, with the H. And it was just to make sure everybody's doing okay. We could, like, if we had to do a punch list of any work or anything like that. But it was mostly just to hear everybody's voice or look everybody in the eye, say, how are we all doing? That continues today, uh, even though we're much larger now. In fact, we had one this morning, and the point of it's our virtual coffee pot because we made a decision at the end of 2022 to go that virtual is working very well for us. So we're what I call virtual first. So our daily hello is like our virtual coffee pot where we can talk about movies, we can talk about gross jello molds, we can do whatever we need to talk, or we can like be in and out in 3 minutes if everybody's just like, I gotta go. But it's that human connection, even though it's virtual. And then we meet once a month in person to keep that rhythm going as well. So those we tried to structure those days more as, you know, learning days, sometime, hopefully not boring training, but maybe some inspiring training, hear from each other, see each other, bring in lunch. Once a quarter, we do uh, like the team introduced an idea to do a quarterly day of giving. So once a quarter,
Mm.
something like build tiny homes or build out, fill backpacks full of food for kids who, need food on the weekend. So, we try to work with different, especially local companies to help pull that together. But that's all part of bringing a different kind of culture. And, I think some people have been really um, anxious to like get everybody back in the office, and we're not feeling that. And anyone who we have a membership at a place. Well, you see, anyone who wants to can rent a desk and come in for the day. So if you want to come in and concept together, or even just spend the day with other people, that's totally doable any day of the week. But it really gives us a lot of flexibility. And I think some of, we're able to work with some really great people who do have to go pick up the kids, who do have to, there's different things that come up in people's lives. And by having, and it takes trust, and you have to like and trust the people you work with, which I think I talked about early. Like that was, one of the motivations to be at Hydrogen. Um, and, work with people within people's lives. And yeah, do we sometimes work nights or weekends? Of course, this is advertising, but we try to make that the exception, and we trust each other enough to know that the work is going to happen, even if we're not all sitting in a room together. And I think people appreciate that. They appreciate being treated like adults.
I love that. So you guys have maintained kind of the post-COVID virtual status, and then so for the monthly come-togethers and the flexibility, that's kind of like a WeWork, a co-work situation where you can kind of use that space as a flex space, and then really the only like mandatory assignment or the mandatory hours is kind of that once a month opportunity to come together as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then does that allow you to still hire like virtually, or do you still kind of center your talent requirements and needs around kind of the Pacific Northwest, Greater Seattle area to still have that opportunity to collaborate in person, or does it allow you to look across a broader geography for talent?
I'd say the majority of us are in the Greater Seattle area, but we definitely, we have one person on the leadership team who lives in Bend, a couple of new really great media hires out of the Portland area, a little bit down in your neck of the woods, and then
Nice.
yeah, and then actually one in Colorado too. So yeah, it definitely opens up the potential to be able to, bring in the right talent, and just like probably, TMI, but like our out of staters only come every other month because we know that's
cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love it. All right. With AI tools rapidly changing copywriting and visual production, how is Hydrogen using technology to enhance creative strategy without diluting some of the human elements that we talked about? What are the biggest areas that you guys are implementing AI, and where is it having the most amount of impact on traditional agency work as we know it?
Right. In addition to the media, content gathering, obviously that doesn't recognize the insight or, some of the upfront strategic thinking. For creative, we tend to use it more in the ideation phase. There's still a lot of ambiguity around the the finished product, but it's definitely a great tool for ideation. And in fact, like jumping over to probably the most recent large effort that's just coming to an end is a summer campaign we did for our client Thumbtack. And they are a very like AI driven organization, and they're like a technology company, and home improvement. But part of the reason they wanted to work with us was we were doing a Seattle specific effort, and it was about being very true to Seattle. So it was a animation illustration direction, and rather than use AI at all, well, other than in getting to the idea, we hired a local illustrator, and yeah, so she actually, could we have done it in AI? Absolutely. But did she capture nuances and that were like a local artist would know about Seattle and bring those to life? Absolutely. So like I was super excited and proud that Thumbtack wanted to go that way, and it I think made for a much more interesting campaign. So I think as we find the right places for AI, it becomes even more important to realize what the wrong places for AI are. So
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting to see even technology leaning clients that might boast about having AI in every, facet of their offering and workflow, leaning into authenticity or some form of traditional storytelling because it's punching through, especially with, the platforms having to actually put a disclaimer or a tag on the content when it's AI driven. We've seen, at least from a media perspective, any commercial that has to be marked as AI completely flops. People won't accept it. Consumers won't accept it, even if their eyes can be tricked, which generally they can't. It's just an offness, even when it's like really, really good. It's not that it's like that's not real. It's like that's off. That doesn't feel
Right.
human. There's something that's in my like primordial brain that's
Mhm.
telling me that this isn't real. So I think that's a good sign, or a good, and then a lot of people are saying, well, when 99% of the content is AI driven, then that's just going to be that's just going to be like banner blindness. Eventually, people will give that up. But I don't know. I'm optimistic that we will be more resilient as humans in what we're willing to accept as reality, at least in the context of storytelling.
I tend to agree with that, and I think the initial, "Oh, AI can do anything," and, here we go. I think we're already starting to see the cracks in that, and you're starting to see more stories like the Thumbtack story where it's like, "Let's make a conscious choice to not use AI here," or let's, use AI in some of the, like, strategy, data gathering at the front end, but let's realize, because I agree, yeah, is it that there's no pores on I don't know, the eyes, there's something sure, and that's just for humans, and there's obviously other things you can do with AI, but I do think that that gap is gonna continue to widen. I think the
Yeah.
initial, like, is, um, it's losing its shine a little bit because
Yeah,
people are
especially with
realizing.
young people, like it's got kind of. I think it goes to like, why are young people booing technology executives at commencement speeches? It's not because they hate those people necessarily. It's that they hate the message or what they hate. That it's not even hate. I'll say it's an underlying fear of all the things that we're hearing from this industry. Oh, we're going to massively disrupt the economy and take young people's jobs. And a lot of that at the end of the day is storytelling to justify, the valuations in which they're raising money, right? It's
Right.
but you risk alienating a huge percentage of your customers at the same, or a huge amount of the population at the same time who are potential customers. So it's a fine razor to walk, I suppose, for these companies, but interesting nonetheless. All right. Client retainers are increasingly shifting towards project based work. How do you build deep long term brand equity when client engagements are becoming more fragmented?
We're quite fortunate in that the majority of our clients are longer term relationships. Um, so that may be a tough one for me to,
Yeah.
you, um, you definitely lose part of that brain trust, part of that ongoing, you know, history, of where a client's been and where they're going if you're airdropping in and out. And I think, a lot of times, especially larger clients may say like, "Oh, we have that, we'll give that to you." But I do believe actually living it, and breathing it means that makes us that much more that that makes us faster. We know what's been done before. So again, that sea of sameness, we're able to like skip out of that because we have we've lived the history, so we know the history. Um, but there are times when it is a project, and I think actually a lot of times, we'll do multiple projects for a client over time, and then you start to build that same sort of brain trust. Um, I'll have to get back to you on that because most of ours, and especially our successful ones, are these longer term relationships where we can, and you build so much more trust. Like, part of jumping off that and like, let's not fall for this in the sea of sameness trap is trusting and believe is the client between, trusting and believing in each other, like we're in this together. And so when you're in there together for the long term, that becomes a much more fluid conversation.
Very cool. Well, congratulations for being able to keep that sticky AOR kind of long-term relationship with clients, because I think that there's a lot of shops that struggle with that these days.
Yeah, fingers
All right.
crossed.
What's the most important skill young copywriters and art directors need to cultivate if they want to move from executing ideas to move into agency leadership and creative leadership? Some of the things that we were talking about that you've been able to track in your career.
Right. And I think you touched on other parts of this earlier with an interview you had previously done. But one of the observations I had is if you're a successful, in my case, writer or art director, and you start to go through the ranks, you know, you've had your career built on competing with other teams for creative ideas. There hasn't your success has been based on your output. So when it suddenly switches and you need to help others, you know, like for years, my job was, you know, the creative team comes in and dumps the giant pile of coal, and you're like, oh, you know, and they may be in love with one part of it, and you go like, oh, there's a diamond over there. I think if we just do this,
Mm.
but so many of us on the creative side don't get that. We don't get that necessarily. You know, it's harder to find ourselves in the room where the client is doing the initial briefing. So the more opportunities I think they can find over time to be in the room early, to be interested in the strategy, to weigh in on the strategy if you agree or don't agree with it, and to start thinking about, you know, I think account management, you know, because they're managing client relationships, there's more of a grounding in learning to like work with other people to bring people together. So look to your account management, you know, cohorts and watch what they're doing, because they're learning how to lead. And that is a skill that is woefully inadequate in a lot of agencies for creatives. You know, you go straight from, you know, creative award-winning rock star to suddenly you're a creative director, and you're trying to get everybody to give you the idea that you have in your head rather than, because that's how you've always been judged. I mean, I think it's easy to see how the trap forms. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I love that idea of trying to expose yourself to more of the assembly line, whether it's strategy, accounts, and kind of understand what each person contributes, and then you can kind of be more informed when it comes to your part of contributing. So I love that. Well, Mary, this has been a fascinating conversation. Love to hear a little bit about your career and then all the success you guys are having over at Hydrogen, growing the team and keeping your new thinking around agency culture and responsibility and flexibility of, stewarding the next generation of agency workforce into, the new world. Love what you guys are doing. If folks want to follow along with your thinking or learn more about the agency, where do you want to send people to stay in touch?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn or go to our website, hydrogenadvertising.com, and drop a note in the contact, and I'll get it. So either way.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Mary, for spending a little bit of time with our audience today. And for those of you who are watching, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe if you want to hear more thought leadership from agency leaders like Mary in the future. If you give us an honest review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, that's how we find a bigger audience. So go ahead and do that today. And last but not least, if there's a brand out there who wants to hear a little bit about what Hydrogen and the indie agency scene is accomplishing these days, or maybe creative talent who's up in the Pacific Northwest area trying to get back to that part of town, maybe wants to connect with the agency, or just someone who you think would benefit from the conversation that I had with Mary today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will wish you a great week. Thanks for spending some time and kicking off the show with our audience this week.
Thanks, Dylan.
Bye-bye. See you soon.